Good chickens. Gave the chickens the rest of my pear butter. I really didn't eat much of that pear butter after the first month. It got, I don't know, the flavor got to me quick, similar to how goat milk gets to me. It's just, it becomes unappealing. So I just sat on all that pear butter and more. I have another half-gallon Tupperware container full of it. That's like a little over a gallon jar full of pear butter, and I only ate maybe a quarter of it and a little bit out of the other one. And then I only ate about half of my fully dehydrated pear butter. Like I made a fruit snack out of it, and I only ate half that bag. It was amazing how much time I spent gathering and processing pears, and how much time I spent gathering and processing amaranth seed grain. I gathered half of a 5-gallon bucket full of amaranth seed, and I didn't even put a dent in that, because it just, my body just, it didn't sound good to my body. It didn't sound appetizing to my body after the amaranth was after only a couple meals. I wasn't interested in it. When I tried to pack a couple of amaranth breads into like 1 month, it overdid me, and I wasn't interested anymore. And then I started looking in more into all the anti-nutrients and toxins that are in plants that they have developed, creating as an effort to ward off animals and humans eating too much of them. So the seeds are especially concentrated in those toxins and anti-nutrients, because the seeds, nuts, and grains are basically the plant's babies. So they're protecting their seed, and even more so, and more specifically, those anti-nutrients and toxins are built into the shell of the seed, into the hull of it. And with amaranth seed, the ratio of hull to inside starch is mostly hull that you're actually consuming when you consume amaranth flour. And so therefore, a majority of what you're eating are those anti-nutrients and toxins. So amaranth also has saponins in it, more saponins than like wheat and rice. So that's another anti-nutrient. It just seems to be a very strongly toxic seed to be consuming, and I didn't realize it until I tried to consume a couple of those meals back to back, and my body rejected it, and I felt it stronger, and I didn't eat any amaranth the entire winter after that. But I'm sure the chickens will love the amaranth seed, probably more so than they're even enjoying this pear butter. Happy chickens. The other thing that I didn't like about the pear butter is that I couldn't eat more than like a cup of it without it giving me diarrhea. It's a laxative, strong laxative. I could only eat like a half a cup and be safe, which is only a couple bites. I could only eat a couple bites at a time, otherwise it'd give me runs. This is pathetic. This is the rest of my pear butter. I'm about to trade it to my friend for some rabbit meat. So I got 2 5-gallon buckets underneath this that are full of wool, and this top one is full of amaranth. And here was my to-go bag, the bag of amaranth, smaller bag of amaranth that I was keeping on my wagon, and I had planned to fill it up as this ran down, and as you can see, I only ate that much of it the whole winter. So let's go see how much the chickens enjoy it. Birds have a totally different digestive system. They've evolved to eat literally a majority of seeds in their diet. So seeds are good for them. We have not been consuming such a large portion of grain in our diet for that long compared to the rest of our diet. See what they like. You like it? They're not gaga over it, but they like it more than I do. Gotta be sure and get it all in there. And you guys better not spill it. Your farmer dad's gonna be pissed if you spill that amaranth seed everywhere. He does not like that weed. It is very invasive on this property. Alright, good chickens. Happy chickens, yeah. Chickens like the amaranth. Amaranth and pear butter smorgasbord. Yeah! So this whole winter, my sheep's milk, just the milk itself, made up probably around 90 to 95% of my consumed calories. And I'd say probably another 5% of that was in cheese and kefir form, reduced kefir. And maybe 1% of that was potatoes. I only had like maybe 10 potato meals tops the whole winter. I only had like one meal a week at most. When I have this much milk, I really don't need and don't want subpar food because raw sheep milk tastes better and is healthier than anything that I eat. So that pear butter and the amaranth probably didn't even make up a single percentage of my winter caloric intake. I collected like a 1 gallon Ziploc bag full of the native barley off the bike path that I foraged last summer, and this is full. Now I got a meal and 2 left. Native hoodie barley. So the hoodie barley probably played another percentage of my entire winter caloric intake. That's just a rough idea of how much more efficient it is to raise dairy sheep than to try to gamble with working energy and time into processing and preserving foods over the wintertime. It's just there's such a sustainable replenishing supply of milk that it's just ridiculous to try to spend so much time to preserve food through the winter, that's especially when it's subpar nutritionally and taste wise, and preparation time that it requires. It's just milk is it's so many magnitudes more efficient calorically than the amount of time and energy you have to put into a foraging diet, or a hunter-gatherer foraging diet, which is getting increasingly unrealistic to be able to survive off of, especially if shit hit the fan and a fraction of the human beings reverted back to having to rely on the wildlife to hunt. That the already reduced number of wildlife on the earth nowadays would be even more scarce in a shit hitting the fan scenario. So I just don't think that people are being very realistic when they assume that they will, just because they have maybe prepared, a dozen meals or even regularly prepared wild meals. If you're supplementing with the artificial economy's calories in order to have the energy and time to go about foraging those single meals every once in a while that you're putting together, it just I think that it's misleading people into a dire situation after shit hits the fan, where they realize that it's actually not nearly as practical to live off of 100% off of a foraging diet or even a foraging and hunting diet, because like I said, there's so much more time in between our successful hunts nowadays because there's such a reduced number of wildlife, and it's only going to get worse if shit hits the fan, so that option will become even less practical in the future. I want people to have some foresight, get their damn dairy goats or dairy sheep or dairy cows, some kind of dairy pet. If you have a dairy pet, you are going to be so much better off when shit is fan than any of these people who plan on running for the hills and hunting and surviving off the land because they know how to hunt and they're delusional about how frequent they would be able to hit something, be able to hunt something and successfully and sustain their caloric needs. It's just not realistic compared to dairy. You have 3 dairy sheep and a ram, and you stagger their breedings with a ram apron, so that your ones that are newest in milk don't get rebred quicker than the ones that have been in lactation for longer. Those ones are the ones that need to be bred so that their lower lactation can be rejuvenated, replenished into a full, a subsequent full lactation. The sheep that already are pretty much in full lactation, you don't want them to rebreed too early, because they do. If you leave it up these sheep, they will get rebred right after they lamb. No joke. So it's important to have a ram so that you can breed when you need to, and you don't have to be searching around frantically for someone who will let you borrow or buy or work trade for a ram. When shit hits the fan, money's not going to be available, so it's going to get increasingly harder for people to do what I do if they don't have their ducks in a line, their sheep in a line before shit hits the fan. They don't have their 3 dairy ewes at least and a ram. Anything more than 3 dairy ewes, from my experience, it becomes much more difficult to manage them. Like, I have 4 sheep right now. I rehomed one of Rosie's daughters, that was the one that was most skittish, to a local farm, just like 10 miles away in my valley. So she'll be able to see him again, but it has definitely been a night and day difference, dropping from 5 ewes down to 4. And from my experience in the past, having anywhere from 1 to 8 is the number of sheep that I've held throughout the years, and 3 seems to be the magic number. 3 ewes, perfect. Gives you your year-round milk supply, but it doesn't keep your hands unnecessarily tied with more ewes than you actually need. And it also provides for the ability to expand when those 3 ewes do have their lambs, and the 2 months or so that it takes to wean them and rehome them. It's important that you don't have 5 ewes, because if one of them has twins or triplets, then that's going to just be way too many to even physically be able to tether or keep safe in transport. Tethering them to the side of the wagon. There are only so many anchor points on the side of this wagon, and I have found out that it's actually more convenient to just leave the new lambs off tether, because they stay with their moms so well. But when they start to wean, when they start to get to 3 months old, like this lamb, and especially when you have twins, if they aren't tethered to the wagon, then the older they get and the more of them that you have, like if you had triplets, then they would tend to do this even more often. They tend to, the older they get and the more brave they get, and the more wean they get from her milk, so the more they're interested in the greens, the more they're eyeballing the things that the wagon and all the other sheep are passing up that are growing on the side of the road, and they will take the opportunity to step off the side of the road and take a bite. And if there's two of them, then they can kind of both stop and stay behind longer without fearing that they're being left behind, because they have their sister, their sibling, right next to them, keeping them company while the wagon is continuing to roll down the road. And then that starts to get dangerous to try to manage, especially on a busier road. And if you had triplets, it would just be out of the question. It would be just incredibly dangerous. So I think that 3 ewes is the perfect number for what you need year-round, calorically. And it's also a low enough number that that you'll need to be able to facilitate managing lambs if they have multiples. Yeah.